Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. At the time of recording, I have just had quite a stressful moment trying to organise uni accommodation for my son Jude. By the time this goes out to you, he will be fully settled in. I'm sure he'll have somewhere to live and everything will be okay. But we are navigating so many moving parts at the moment, so many things going on. And it's hard, isn't it, sometimes, trying to do your job, trying to do all the things that are asked of you, being present and flexible when there's emerging problems and things going on, and just being a parent as well at the same time. I was literally saying to Matt in the break that sometimes it is so difficult to just focus on the thing that you're trying to get done because there's so much unfinished business in your mind thinking about all these other things that are going on. Jude and I also recorded a podcast together today, and we were really talking all about life change from his perspective of being on the cusp of young adulthood and stepping out and study and career and everything that's coming to him. But actually life change is what I want to talk to you about today, because I feel like I'm on the step of some major life change myself. I can feel the shifts. I feel like I'm back in a season where I know I'm moving towards a new life season, a new change. And I think change will come with it. So as I've just said, Judy's moving out and going to uni. My eldest son has just started a new school for sixth form. And I can see down the track that pretty significant life change is coming. There is some other things that are hinting at this. Obviously, the age of my children, the fact that I've got a book coming out in a couple of months. I think it's going to bring about some life change for me, good and maybe not so good. I also have a really poorly mother, and so I'm anticipating everything that's coming with that over the next 12 months, I guess. So life change is on the horizon, and I want to talk about it because major life change is really a big deal and can be really hard, and even smaller life changes can. And I think if you're listening to this, you might be coming out of a major life change, you might be in a period in between a major life stage, or you might be finding yourself just heading into major life change. And so I think it's really important for us to talk about this. A big period of life change for me was about 10 years ago, which is why I feel like it's probably on the horizon again, because it's just, that's the cyclical nature of life. 12 years ago, we moved house, and 10 years ago, we both changed careers, and we had some sudden loss and some really quite significant family changes. And in that moment of major life change, nobody wants to be kind of in the worst bits of that. I don't think anybody goes, yay, major life change. But actually, obviously, good things come out of that and new seasons come from that. But I thought it'd be really good for us to talk about this a little bit together today. What happens in major life change? Why do we do it? What's the challenge? And even thinking about it within career change as well. Because career change is becoming a bigger and more apparent thing. More and more of us are changing career. More and more of us feel that it could be on the horizon. I think I just read a stat actually on this. Let me just get it because I don't want to give you wrong. Just want to make stats up. 55% of people are considering the work they do as being something that defines who they are. But another 50% of us are actually seeking a new season of our life and looking for a new job. So a lot of us put a lot of weight on career transition or what we do with our time, whether that's paid or not. But about half of us reckon we're on the cusp of a life change. So if you're listening to this, you could be in the 50% that are in it, or the 50% that are not yet in it and will soon be in it instead. So one of the things that happens as well is that when we're given a bit more time to think, like the reason loads of people changed career after the pandemic or considered it was because they actually stopped and thought about it. Loads of people came to me in that time and said, I want to talk about my life. I want to talk about my priorities. I think things need to change. Everybody went through this reflective process. And quite a lot of people's plans for career change and life change came about because of the pandemic. So I wonder if you're listening to this, what changed for you after the pandemic? Did you have meaningful, lasting change, or did things temporarily change and then everything go back to how it was? I don't think many of us have gone back to how it was. There are things that have changed, but some people took that time to make bigger, difficult choices. Maybe they were forced to make those difficult choices and thought about something different. So how can we do this? How can we think about this? I read a really good article that I want to talk. The reason I've got this open in front of me, if you're watching on YouTube, is I want to talk about some of the key points around how we handle transition. Okay, there are like 3 parts to change that we need to talk about and think about what occurs. And maybe as you're listening, you can think about which bit of this change and transition you are in. So the first part, and actually Jude talked about this, is the separation. So the first thing for us to do is to actually get separate from the thing that we were doing or were part of. You know, when we were in lockdown, we got that separation from the way things were, which helped us to see differently. We started to find ourselves doing things that we weren't doing before. There is so much to suggest that actually having that reflection time or that separation from what it was, like habit discontinuity from the way things were, continuity, sorry, I'm trying to say, means that we are more malleable and we can think about living differently. Old habits and old selves will continue to rear their sort of heads if we don't have separation from them. I remember when I was going through a period of really trying to change some of the ways I was living, there were some friendships and some environments that I was in, this is many years ago now, that I just thought I have got to separate a bit from this because it's really difficult to change if I don't. If you've got an addiction or an issue like that, you have to separate yourself. So according to this sort of expert on change, that when we're thinking of making a major life change, the first thing that has to happen is some sort of separation, separating ourselves, whether that is, you know, this de-indoctrination or the rehabilitation that comes from, you know, people who have been substance abusers. We have to pull ourselves away from our old identity. So if you are trying to make a change, how do you facilitate that whilst still being in the life that you are in? Because we can't all just go, oh, well, I'm going to pull away from everything. You know, this separation is even what's going to happen when Jude goes to uni. He's going to begin to change and grow by having that separation from the way things were. So I think for us to think about is this idea of being in a time of separation or pulling away from certain activities, certain opportunities, and helping us to be a little bit more selective about that. This writer, whose name is Herminia Ibarra, she also talks about, as well as separations, that in these times we have what she might call a liminal learning. It's when we're in that liminal time and space, to use an old-fashioned phrase, we are betwixt and between. We are in between two things, that we find ourselves being able to look at things differently and to experiment. So the second stage is this liminality. We've separated, we've pulled away. Liminality is when you're in this really difficult bit of being in between, betwixt or between. I've talked about this before, but when you are giving birth to a baby, there is a time which you might call liminality. It's actually called transition in labour. And it is when you know there is no going back, but the baby is not yet here. And you are in between final stages of labour. And your baby is getting ready to come, but you still feel like you're a long way away. And liminality, if you are in that time, is actually some of the hardest time, because you feel like now you can't go back, and yet you feel like you are not yet established in a new. I personally find that quite difficult, but if we're going to turn it on its head, it is a really good opportunity for us to have learnings, to have new possibilities and new ways of doing things. It's a time that we can think about experimenting or doing different things or connecting with new and different people. It's like an interlude time, I guess. It's a time where we can suggest or try different things. And one of the things that this writer talks about is that we've got to learn, as I say a lot, to allow ourselves to learn and to gather data and information without feeling like we are committing to it just yet, without feeling like this learning we're doing is the thing that we have to do. So, we can give all sorts of examples here, but I'm going to, share this one here. When the pandemic hit, Sophie, who was a former lawyer, was transitioning out of a 2-decade career and found herself wanting to explore a range of new work possibilities, even filmmaking, journalism, and sustainability consulting. So, right, imagine this is like any of the clients that, I may have, or even where you're at. Life looks like this, and you want to transition out to something really quite different. Now, lockdown gave her this liminal time, this betwixt and between, where the normal rules that governed Sophie's life were lifted, and she felt able to experiment with all sorts of work, all kinds of different leisure pursuits without committing to any of them. She made the most of that period, taking on courses, working on startup ideas, freelance consulting, joining a non-profit board, and all sorts of things. Now, you will not necessarily have a liminal moment that means, I've suddenly got loads and loads of time to try all sorts of things. But the question I want to ask you and me is, how do we create a liminal interlude, even if we don't have a lockdown and life continues to be the same? How do we make space to experiment and have this liminality where we know that as we go into this space, we probably can't go back to just the way things were? How do I make room? It's a bit like my son's gap year, that idea of liminality. I'm going to try all these different things before I move into the next season. So if you are beginning to feel that sense of, I think things are going to change for me, I think it might be time for something new, whether that's career, location, life stage that you're in, thinking about moving into a new life stage, have a more positive view of that in-between stage and think about what you can experiment with, knowing that experiments in and of themselves are not commitments. Experiments are there to tell us, give us feedback and go, I should do more of this, or I should do less of this. How do we make room for doing that? And you've got to be potentially ruthless about that. I know a few people who've of late actually applied to have sabbaticals from their work. Sometimes that's unpaid. Sometimes you might be lucky enough to have a paid sabbatical. You might need to say, I'd need to reduce my hours. I know a few people who have requested going to 4-day weeks. Actually, I know quite a few people who have moved into this 4-day week mentality because they want to create some liminal space. And these people who've gone to 4-day weeks, I just want to tell you, there is cost to them. These individuals that I'm speaking about are not in the abundance of wealth that couldn't do with the extra day's pay. But they are being brave and courageous to consider making space in their life so that they can consider what might be next for them. Because the problem is that sometimes going wholehearted plunge into something new is quite difficult, because if we do that and we hate it, we've got to go right back to the drawing board with even more baggage and even more stuff to work out. The other thing is where we just have to be ruthless about how do we create time and space, and what will we have to stop doing if we want to do that. When I wrote the book earlier in the year, I wasn't able to stop working. I did try to slightly reduce the output of what I was doing, but in reality, there wasn't a lot of change there. So I had to create other interludes, liminal interludes, to use this language, to allow me to put something else into my diary. And so as you think about this, they don't last forever. The whole point of an interlude is you give something a go and you gather feedback from that. I know people who've started to do something as a side hobby, which has actually turned into the potential of a new career for them. And a lot of us have to manage a transition period by working side by side, doing 50-50 of something in order for us to continue to operate and pay the bills. So the question here is, the point here is it takes a lot of the pressure off. So going back to this Sophie, all those different things that she did, she took stock afterwards, and she realised that she didn't grow in the board role that she took as much as she'd expected, whereas she'd very quickly started to build meaningful connections in the film industry, and these were vital recognitions for her to make before she committed herself to the next steps in her transition plan. So I was coaching somebody just the other day and we were talking about this. She wants to explore some more opportunities in the wider medical profession. So she works currently clinically and she has some other responsibilities as well. But there's a few things that she would love to be doing sort of 5 years from now. And we were talking about how does she make space for that and how does she experiment with that without feeling that she's committing to something or, dropping the commitments that she's currently got or the financial responsibility she's got. And she may have to lose some leisure time to do that. She may have to reduce a few of her work hours to do that. But if she gathers the information over the next couple of years that she needs, she's going to be so well equipped to move into another season. One of the things you could consider is some training. If you think about doing a course alongside your work or going to networking opportunities or making connection with people. In fact, today, as I'm recording, lovely Matt, who is our producer of the podcast, a friend of his and somebody I know too called Cheyenne is here too because he is exploring this as a career and he's in transition, he's learning. So he's taking the opportunity to figure out for him, what do I need to know? What do I need to find out more about? And room has been made for him to do that. There's another lesson in that, which is if you don't ask, you don't get. There are so many people who are willing to help if you will just literally ask them. So if you feel like life change is coming, think about making this liminal space where you are not yet committed. You don't have to be in it for the long haul, but you find ways to grow your strengths, grow your skills, try a few different things to see what actually is life-giving for you and can then become part of your actual transition plan. So when we've separated, we've pulled away or we've taken stock, we've taken that time to think, then we've had some time to learn in that liminal space, we then have to reintegrate, okay? We have to go back to where we were before, and that is the beginning of something new. Now, again, going back to the pandemic, when we started to do reintegration then, I cannot tell you the number of conversations I had with friends saying, oh, I don't want everything to go back to the way it was. I mean, there were things we were really longing for, weren't there? But there were other things that we just didn't want back. The hustle of for me, the taxi driving and the loads and loads of clubs we were doing all the time. The amount of travel my husband was doing just to commute was just so much before the pandemic. And when we were going to reintegrate, we needed to talk about what that was going to look like, because you have a window of time, according to research, where we can re-establish ourselves and things to look different before we just find ourselves going back into what it was before. So there's a fresh start effect that apparently happens in new seasons. And like one study, for example, found that the window of opportunity for engaging in more environmentally sustainable behaviours lasts for up to 3 months when we move house. Similarly, research on the fresh start effect shows that while people experience heightened goal-orientated motivation when they return to work after a holiday, this motivation peaks on the first day back and declines rapidly after. So fresh start effect, we have to take those fresh start moments and try and capitalise upon them as much as we can. There are little narrow windows of opportunity that open up to us when our retune has been busted. That's why lots of people after holidays suddenly don't want to go back to work, because they're like, oh, I don't want things the way they were. We have these little moments where we can consider transition. So when we are having to reintegrate, when it is time for a new beginning, what is the tweak or change that you can make? What can you hold on to post-holiday? What can you hold on to post-weekend even? What can you hold on to on the first day of the month? What can you hold on to when you start a new job or a position? How can you take something and say, I don't want it to look like it did before, and feed that forward into this new season of your life? Because otherwise we're going to find ourselves back in the situation that we were in before, because actually external shocks rarely produce the lasting change we're looking for. The more typical pattern after we receive some kind of wake-up call is to just revert back to normal. And this is so depressing because there's so many of us who are trying to make major life change. So therefore, we have to take the learning and think, right, I need to take my opportunity and make the shift and be different. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to my old habits and things are going to be as they were before. And even it might be a good reflective activity for you to think about what has changed in my life since the pandemic was over and we returned to normal. I think we have quite a different life stage that we're in. But I think my husband has a slightly better commuting situation for sure. He's still travels a lot because his job involves him traveling globally. But in terms of to the office, that is definitely less than it was before. He has returned to the office. I think it's really important he's back in the office, but there are some changes that have been made there. And I think probably patterns of walking with our dog are definitely more established and better, along with loads of other things if I stopped and thought about it. So there is an encouragement to you to take that opportunity that comes from breaks, from changes, and to begin to help ourselves with these major life changes and to move into the next thing. So we have to decide how we use these life change moments to help us, because I guess what I'm trying to say here is that when you find yourself in a moment of significant change, maybe you're on mat leave and you're listening to this, you are heading into a season, if you're on mat leave, where you have separated from what was before. You then move into this liminal time where you're obviously learning about looking after a baby, but potentially have opportunity to think and to reflect and do things differently, especially if you fight for it. And then you're going to reintegrate. And so what do you do when you come back after that reintegrations? How do you make sure things look different? How do you take those opportunities? The good news is, most of the time we're moving in and out of these life seasons if we pay attention. I am in my 40s and can recognise I've been through quite a few of these in and out life change moments where I've been coming out of a life change, been in the life change, or coming back out the other side of it. And it shows us here that there are some things that we can do in that if we're willing to. See the benefit of being separated, or see the benefit of things looking like they're shifting. Take the opportunity in the betwixt and between time to learn and to grow and to experiment without feeling any kind of commitment to that. And then when you're reintegrating, when you're stepping back into that space, think carefully about how you can be different, how life can look different, what those new beginnings can look like, so that you don't just reestablish yourself exactly as things were before. I think there's also important to say, because obviously this is a podcast about purpose, that purpose is found in all of these things, in the daily actions and choices. It's not this mega revelation. And as you're going about a life change moment, there will be learning for you about the person you are and also the person you're leaving behind. I just think there's one last thing I want to say on this, which is I'm touching upon this from the episode with Jude, that Jude was in quite a moment where he felt very stuck about deciding university because he actually hadn't done the work of letting go of the previous season. And there was almost like a key that was unlocked for him when he recognised that the thing that had been there before was over. And if you're listening to this and you're in a life change moment, and again, there's so many here. You could be heading you could be getting married. You could be finding yourself actually separating or heading towards divorce. You could be having a baby or returning to work having had a baby. You could be like me and feeling like you're moving into that bird launching season, which is the phrase I like to use rather than empty nesting. Each of those seasons, you cannot embrace all the brilliant stuff that's going to come in the next one if you don't do the work of going, actually, this is over. This season has come to an end. I can be grateful for everything it's been. I can also be grateful it's over if it's been really hard. But I cannot move into everything that's for me in the next chapter of my life if I'm just longing to be where I was before. And that goes for you too. If you're returning to work from mat leave, if you do not accept the fact that maternity leave is over and be grateful for all it was and grieve the fact it's finishing, you cannot embrace what's coming. If I don't accept the fact that my children are not little anymore and the way they need me is going to look different, and sort of grieve the fact that period of my life and the identity I got from that is over, I can't fully embrace all the wonderful things that are going to come in this time for me. I know that life has still got good things for me, as well as really hard things. I'm aware of that too. But if I keep looking back and with sort of sadness rather than gratitude for what was, I really think it's very difficult to embrace the next. So perhaps if you're listening to this, have a think about recent or upcoming transitions. Think about one you've been through or perhaps the next one that's on the horizon for you. And think about how you can both process that well and grieve or be grateful for it, And then one small action maybe that you can take to align yourself with your own sense of purpose during a time of transition. Where can you learn? How can you show up and be you? I'd love to hear loads from you about what transition feels like for you, why life change can be so, so hard. I'd love to hear your reflections on this, because you always add so much to the conversation. And I guess just to say that one of the things that I talk about in the book, which by the way is available for pre-order, the links will be in the show notes, is understanding the season that you are in. And I'll probably do a whole episode on seasons coming forward, but seasons kind of represent the types of life transitions we are in. And we are all in a season. There is no such thing as no season. You might be in between seasons or on the edge of one and moving into the other, but you'll be in a season of life, and you have to recognize the one you're in order to be ready for the next one. And you have to be willing to let that season go to move into the next. It's like it was really funny, when it was the end of August, we were still like, oh, summer, 1st of September, everyone's ready to embrace leaves and hot chocolate and slippers and all that and getting their woolly jumpers out again. And we've got to let go of summer to have autumn. And you've got to let go of winter to embrace spring, and so on and so forth. So let's come back to that topic of seasons and look at it together. But instead, today, have a think about those moments of transition. Be kind to yourself where life transition is hard. It's flipping difficult sometimes. I've shed many a tear over this period, but I refuse to believe that there aren't good things still coming. I refuse to think that, there can't be wonderful things down the track for me, even though some things are definitely over, and like I am definitely in a different season. The best is yet to come, right?